Uh, yeah. Yeah.
Question 1. A hospital social worker is meeting with a 78-year-old client who is admitted to the inpatient unit after a stroke. After completing the intake assessment, the client shared he resides alone and has no family support to assist him with his activities of daily living. Although the client acknowledges he is weak and unable to care for himself, he shares he wants to discharge home. The social worker is concerned about the client's well being. What should the social worker do next? All right, y'all, so let's focus in on what is going on in this scenario. So, we are a hospital social worker and we are meeting with a 78-year-old client who's been admitted to your unit following a stroke. Now, you've completed an intake assessment. During this intake assessment, you found out he lives alone. He has no family to support to assist him with his activities of daily living. Now, this 78-year-old acknowledges the fact that he's weak and he's unable to care for himself. Despite that, he wants to discharge home. You as the social worker, you're like, I'm concerned about his well-being. But the question is asking, what should the social worker do next? So we are going to underline next because this is very important. So let's look at our answer choices. We have A, send referrals to assisted living facilities near the client's residential address. No, we're going to rule this out because if we go back to this question, it tells us that this client, he wants to return back home. So this is not going to be an option for us. So we're going to rule this one out. B, develop a safety plan with the client to support independence at home. Okay, this looks like a strong answer so far, so let's hold on to it. Or C, arrange for the client to be placed in a nursing home. Absolutely not. Nowhere in this does it say that that client is agreeable to be placed in a nursing home. So the correct answer for this situation is going to be B. Develop a safety plan with the client to support independence at home. And that's exactly what you're doing. You're supporting this client's right to return back home. You can arrange for possible home health care services to help him out. Question 2. A social worker is meeting with a group of adults who are caregivers for their parents. During a group session, a member begins to share how he behaves toward his parents when he becomes frustrated. Based upon a member's statement, the social worker becomes concerned that the member's behavior may constitute abuse. What should the social worker do next? All right, y'all. So we have another next question. So there is a strong possibility that all of these answer selections could be correct. But let's go back into this scenario and focus in on what's going on so we can select the best answer. So you are a social worker who is hosting a group for adults who are caregivers for their parents. During your session, a member begins to share how he behaves toward his parents when he becomes frustrated. Based upon what the member stated, the social worker then becomes concerned that the member's behavior may constitute abuse. What should the social worker do next? Are we going to A, encourage the member to provide more specific information in a group? Absolutely not. In no situation would we ever want to encourage this behavior where we are going to talk about abuse. So let's rule that out. B, validate the member's feelings and behaviors for being a caregiver for his parents. Possibly. So let's hold on to this. You always want to validate feelings and behaviors, but this may not be the next thing that we do. So C, engage the other members in a discussion of what is acceptable behavior. No, this one is very similar to answer selection A, so we're going to rule that out. D, meet with the member privately after the group to review the situation. Absolutely. This is going to be the correct answer. This is what you as a social worker would want to do next in a situation where you have a member in a group who is sharing information that could possibly constitute abuse. Question 3. An outpatient social worker is meeting with a client who was diagnosed with severe depression and a history of multiple suicide attempts. The client tells the social worker about her partner's decision to end a 4-year relationship and shares she is still in shock and has been experiencing grief for the past 2 weeks. The social worker acknowledged the client's feelings about the breakup during a session. What should the social worker do next? Okay, y'all, we have another next question. So let's go back in this scenario and let's focus in on what's going on. So you are a outpatient social worker who is meeting with a client that has been diagnosed with severe depression and has a history of multiple suicide attempts. During a session, the client tells you about her partner's decision to end a 4-year relationship. And the client said she's still in shock and she's been experiencing grief for the past 2 weeks. As a social worker, you acknowledge the client's feelings about the breakup during a session. What should you do next? Are you going to A, assess the client's risk for suicide? Wow, this is a very strong answer selection here. And it's a strong answer selection because if we look back into this scenario, you have a client who's been diagnosed with severe depression. They have a history of multiple suicide attempts. Their partner decided to end a 4-year relationship, and the client said she's still in shock and she's been experiencing grief for the past 2 weeks. So this is a very strong answer selection here. So we are going to hold on to that. Let's not rule it out. Then we have B, involuntarily admit the client to a psychiatric unit. No, we are not going to do this. This would be inappropriate in this situation because nowhere in this situation does it say that she is suicidal. C, assess the client's support system to help her with her recent breakup. Okay, this is a good option. However, when you compare it back to option A, it's not going to be the next thing that you do. So we are going to rule this one out. D, provide the client with self-care strategies. Again, this is also something that you could do further throughout treatment. However, it's not going to be the next thing you do. So we're going to rule this out. For this situation, the correct answer is going to be A, assess the client's risk for suicide. And that's going to be because of those key factors of severe depression, history of multiple suicide, and the client's been experiencing grief for the past 2 weeks. So let's assess the client's risk for suicide. Question 4. A 5th grade teacher consults the school social worker about a student who has had chemotherapy and lost a lot of hair. The student appears sad as he's not engaging during class. He's doing poorly in schoolwork and has fallen asleep several times throughout the school day. What should the social worker do first? Okay, y'all, so this one is different from the previous question. This one is asking us, what is the social worker going to do first? So there's a strong possibility that these answer selections could all be correct. However, it's asking you, do you know how to prioritize and pick the one out that should be done first? So let's go back into this one. We have a 5th grade teacher who's consulted the school social worker about a student who has had chemotherapy and lost a lot of hair. The teacher's reporting that the student appears sad as he's not engaging during class, he's doing poorly in his schoolwork, and he's fallen asleep several times throughout the school day. As the social worker, what is going to be the first thing that you do? Are you going to A, contact the parents to gain more information? This is a very strong answer, so we are going to hold on to this. Are we going to B, provide psychoeducation to the teacher for her to understand the effects of chemotherapy and mood and energy? Nope, we are going to rule this out. This would not be the very first thing that we do, although it is good, but it's not going to be the first thing. So we're ruling it out. C, refer the child to a children's cancer support group in the community. Again, no, this is not going to be the first thing that you do in this situation. Let's rule it out. D, meet with the student and explore the student's feelings about what it means to have cancer. Okay, so this is also a very good answer selection. So if we look back here, are we going to contact the parents to gain more information? Or are we going to meet with the student and explore the student's feelings about what it means to have cancer? Well, given the fact that you are a school social worker and you've been consulted by the teacher, in this situation, the correct thing would be to A, contact the parents to gain more information about what's going on. Once you've done that, you'll get that permission and then you can meet with the student. Question 5. A teacher consults with the social worker about a 12-year-old student who is experiencing difficulties with reading out loud. The teacher reports the student will frequently make mistakes when reading from his social studies book. What is the student's most likely diagnosis? Okay, so this question is asking us about a student's most likely diagnosis. So if we go back into this scenario, we have a teacher who is consulting the social worker about a 12-year-old student who's experiencing difficulties with reading out loud. The teacher reports the student will frequently make mistakes when reading from his social studies book. What is the student's most likely diagnosis? Is it A, specific learning disorder with impaired reading? Okay, this one is very strong because if we go back to this scenario here, we know that the teacher is consulting us because this 12-year-old student is experiencing difficulties with reading out loud. Reading out loud is very congruent with impaired reading. So let's hold on to A. Is it B, specific learning disorder with impaired written expression? No, nowhere in this scenario does it indicate a impairment with a written expression. So let's rule that out. C, childhood onset fluency disorder. Nope, this is not going to be correct. So we are also going to rule C out. Intellectual disability. Again, no. We are going to rule this out. For question 5, the correct answer is going to be specific learning disorder with impaired reading. Because when we look back at this, we know that we have a 12-year-old student experiencing difficulties when reading out loud and will frequently make mistakes when reading from his social studies book. A is going to be our correct answer. Question 6. A college student seeks therapy for problems with her coursework. She states that sometimes she is really productive and can go without much sleep for a few days straight. However, she'll end up crashing shortly after. She reports that she'll feel bad about herself and not want to get out of bed for a few days because she is so unmotivated. What is the client's diagnosis most likely? Okay, so question 6 is going to ask you, are you familiar with diagnosis and are you able to pick them out given the certain scenarios and symptoms that are being presented here? So we have a college student that's seeking therapy because she has problems with her coursework. During a session, she indicates that she can be really productive and she can go without sleep for a few days straight. However, after those few days, she'll end up crashing. She reports that she feels bad about herself and she won't get out of bed for a few days because she's unmotivated. So when we look at our answer selection, we have A, bipolar disorder, B, bipolar 2 disorder, C, schizoaffective disorder, or D, psychothymic disorder. Given this situation, the correct answer is going to be D. D is the correct answer because the client is displaying a milder form of bipolar, and the client reports having hypomanic symptoms when she states that she can go a few days straight without much sleep, followed by depressive symptoms that do not fit the criteria for major depression. So A and B are incorrect because the client is not experiencing full-blown mania or major depression. And C is incorrect because there are no symptoms of psychosis. So we are ruling these out, and our correct answer is going to be D. A school social worker is using a crisis intervention model to help a family whose son was recently expelled from high school. The family is overwhelmed, does not know how to proceed, and is having significant difficulties around communication. After completing an assessment and establishing rapport with the family, the social worker should next. Okay, so we are back to our next questions. So let's go back in and let's focus in on what's going on in question 7. So you are a school social worker who's using crisis intervention to help a family whose son was recently expelled from high school. The family states that they're overwhelmed, they don't know how to proceed, and they're having significant difficulties around communication. So as a social worker, you have already completed the assessment and you've established rapport with the family. So what would be the next thing that you would do given that you are going to be using a crisis intervention model? Is it going to be A, teach the family effective communication techniques? Possibly, but that's not going to be the next thing that we do when using a crisis intervention model because we've only completed an assessment and we have established rapport. Is it going to be B, refer the family to a support group? This is a good option, however, it's not going to be the next thing that we do. Is it going to be C, explore the last straw before the crisis occurred? Okay, this one is a very strong answer selection to select because when you're using that crisis intervention model, you want to allow the family to express their feelings, to vent, and to gain a clear perception of what they identify as the problem. So we're going to hold on to C. D, set up a meeting with the school administration to discuss reinstating the son. No, this is not something that we would do when we're using that crisis intervention model. So our correct answer is going to be C. We are going to explore what the last straw was before the crisis occurred. Question 8. During the initial assessment, a new client reports that she was recently fired from her job. She goes on to say that she would like to show her boss a thing or two about what it's like to be unemployed, but denies any plan to harm her boss. She admits to drinking 4 to 5 drinks per day over the past 3 years and tells a social worker that she also recently used cocaine recreationally with a friend who has been feeling really depressed lately. What should the social worker do first? Okay, so it is a lot going on in this scenario here. So let's go and let's focus in on the key things. So we are conducting an initial assessment with the new client who reports they were recently fired from their job and she would like to show her boss a thing or two about what it's like to be unemployed. However, she denies any plan to harm her boss. She does admit to drinking 4 to 5 drinks per day over the past 3 years And she told the social worker that she used cocaine with a friend because they were really depressed. What is going to be the very first thing that you would do in this situation? Are you going to A, refer the client to a substance abuse treatment center? No, we don't even know if this client is going to be agreeable. So we are going to decline this one. Not it. B, provide psychoeducation about the impact of substances on mood. Okay, this is a strong one so far because we are going to be providing education about the impact of substances because she told us that she's drinking 4 to 5 drinks per day for the past 3 years, and she also used cocaine. So we're going to hold on to B. Are we going to C, explore what she means by show her boss a thing or two? No. And the reason we're not going to select this one is because she already declined any plan to harm her boss. So we don't need to explore that. So we're going to rule that out. It's not going to be the first thing that we do. D, refer the client to an employment agency based on her skills and training. No, we are going to rule this one out. This is not the client's presenting problem, and it's also not what you should do first as a social worker, especially given the fact that she has disclosed drinking 4 to 5 times a day for the past 3 years and using cocaine. Let's start off with some psychoeducation about the impact on substances and mood. B is going to be your correct answer. Question 9. A client with a history of suicide attempts comes to a session and reports that she wants to end it all. The social worker learns that the client has a plan to take pills she has hidden at home. What should the social worker do next? Okay, so let's get into this one. So we have a client who's meeting with us. This client has a history of suicide attempts, and they came into the session and they said, I want to end it all. The social worker learns that the client does have a plan to take the pills that she's hidden at home. So as a social worker, what is going to be the next thing that you do? Are you going to initiate an involuntary hospitalization? No, we are not, because we always want to see if this client would be agreeable. So we are going to eliminate selection A. B, have the client sign a no harm contract. This does not exist, so we are going to eliminate that. C, refer the client to a psychiatrist. No, there's no need for that there. D, explore voluntarily hospitalization. Yes, we are going to first see if this client is going to be agreeable to be admitted to an inpatient unit, because she does have this plan to take the pills that she's hidden at home, and she acknowledges the fact that she is suicidal because she said, I want to end it all. So we are going to explore if she is agreeable to hospitalization inpatient. All right, y'all, last question. A 22-year-old woman comes to therapy at the request of her parents. She shares with the social worker that her boyfriend of 6 months has beat her up a couple of times, and that her parents want the social worker to convince her to leave him. But she loves him and isn't going to be told what to do. What should the social worker do first? Okay, so let's look back at this question. So we have a 22-year-old woman who's come to see you at the request of her parents. During your session, she shares that her boyfriend of 6 months has beat her up a couple of times, and her parents are aware because the parents want the social worker to convince her to leave him. However, she says, I love him and I'm not going to be told what to do. So as a social worker, what is going to be the first thing that you do? Are you going to A, obtain a release to speak with her parents? No, this is not going to be the first thing that you do when you're in this session with this 22-year-old woman. Are you going to B, discuss the cycle of violence? Okay, Possibly. So let's hold on to this one. C, acknowledge her right to make decisions about her relationship. Oh, wow. So this is a very strong answer. So we're going to hold on to this. D, explore her ambivalence about leaving. No, we are going to rule this one out. So we are stuck between discuss the cycle of violence or acknowledge her right to make decisions about her relationship. Given the fact that this is your first encounter with this client, you are going to acknowledge her right to make decisions about her relationship.